Hello, Graham Vincent, Violinmaker, musician. Yeah, it's Q&A time. So a bit of an apology really to start off with. Last time I uploaded the Q&As and then lots of people left questions, and somehow or other, in my infinite wisdom, I managed to actually sort of delete the video off YouTube. So I kind of found it on my phone and re-uploaded it, but all those questions that were had been left, I managed to get a little part of each one by looking at the notifications that had come in previously and copying those. So I pasted those together, but it means I'm missing big chunks of a lot of the questions that were asked. So if you asked a question last time and you don't feel I've answered it this time, please leave it again and I'll do my best. Yeah, it's been a bit of an interesting week really. I also uploaded a video about making a violin making knife from a really tough modern sort of twin fast wood screw, which got mixed reactions. I think some people found my approach a little bit strange, but actually all I can say is it does produce a really fast knife to make that works really well. So no, I was very happy with it personally, and yeah, the technique looks a little bit strange, but have a look at the video, it does work. One comment that was made was that I hadn't mentioned extraction, which is a very valid comment, because of course a lot of modern screws, I mean, some of them are treated with paint and others are treated with zinc or other coatings. So when you're actually sort of heating them, it is worth extracting. Working in a well-ventilated place, or possibly outside. So that was a very valid comment. Yeah. So shall we have a look at the questions, or the bits of the questions that I've got? Right. I still find myself stuck feeling like valid. This, I mean, it's a really good one from the real non sequitur, who I believe may well have joined me on Patreon, so it's fantastic, thank you for that. I still find myself stuck feeling like violin design could be dramatically improved in regard to sound projection through the translation of energy. Yeah, this is such a huge subject, it really is. And I kind of agree with you. That ties in with another question. And maybe I should ask that question, read you that question at the same time, and we'll tackle both of those together, because my thoughts on the whole thing are kind of related. And it was a question from, I think this is from Doug from memory. I've been studying the relational geometry and finding some conflicting statements. Some say that height of ribs and size of bouts doesn't matter much. Others say that the interior volume definitely has. That's all of the question I've got, I'm afraid. As I say, I managed to delete it. Yeah, there's so much talk about internal volume and all the rest of it. I personally feel that you need to think of a violin more like a speaker than you do like something like a guitar. With a guitar, you've got this really fine balance between keeping some sustain and getting the most energy out in a controlled kind of way. So you pluck the string, you only put that effort in once, and then it's that balancing act between letting it ring for a good amount of time, but also getting the sound out of it. And obviously the louder it is, the more energy it's sending out, the shorter the sustain, so to speak. So that's why electric guitars, for example, a well-made electric guitar the string will just go on and on, ringing for ages. Violin is a completely different animal. On a violin, you are putting the force in, or you're providing drive, if you like, all the time that the note is being played, and so it's more like a speaker in my mind. So the way that I kind of tackle violins is I kind of think of the front, specifically the section between the F holes, as a sort of a speaker cone in a way, and the periphery, the shape, the form of the top, with mine tend to have quite a wide flat area. That area and the thickness of that area, allowing sort of movement, distortion, and so on in the centre. So I'm giving such a disjointed reply. I do apologise. I can hear myself not getting across what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is I tend to try and build violins so that it gives a freedom for that centre section to move, and obviously some of it is carried through to the back by the sound post as well. I think the sound post kind of constrains the vibration of that front piece for some frequencies and takes that movement through to the back plate on other frequencies. So there's a lot going on there. And so that, for me, yes, the internal volume is important. And certainly when you get to things like, you know, cellos or violoncello da spalla, violas, that internal volume is significant. But with a violin, you're not, you want a nice response on the bottom G and so on, but a lot of the sound is the higher frequencies and how they're dealt with. And I have made a violin with an extremely low arch, which sounded amazing. It was one of my best sounding violins, and it kind of just looked so small because there was very little swell in the body. I do my ribs at 30 mil all the way around, so it was quite a petite little instrument, but the sound from it was huge. And I think it's because, you know, it, like I say, I think of it more as a speaker than I do as I think of it as some sort of resonating chamber. So I hope that answers Doug's question. And non sequitur, the real non sequitur, I think it was, where are we? Yeah, I think I hope that you feel that kind of addresses your statement in a way. I know, I do understand where you're coming from, and I feel much the same, really. So that was your opening statement, but it goes on. After a lot of consideration, I may have arrived at a potentially easy manipulation. Springs integrated into the inside of the corners. The violin is nothing but a series of springs in cooperation. A small piece of maple, similar in composition to the bridge, could be slotted in after flattening the corner blocks, glued in place. The piece would need to be shaped similarly to the feet of the bridge, with profiles to the wings. The pieces ideally would each be voiced to resonate sympathetically with a specific string. This theoretically could be achieved by simply setting the blank piece and bowing the open string tune violin next to it, then trimming with chisel, thinning with sandpaper. That's, on the face of it, quite an odd idea. However, that idea is something that many people have already tried, not specifically with bits in the corners, which is a novel twist on it, but there's, I think one of the most commonly seen kind of devices like this is a plate, almost, it almost looks like a small model of the USS Enterprise, this sort of flat disc offset from the front, which is there to vibrate. Then I've also seen a bass bar with like tuned, almost like lollipop sticks projecting from it, so that each one of them vibrated at a given frequency. So the upshot of this is none of these have been adopted because they didn't seem to add that much, which is why I kind of push you back to my suggestion of considering the system more like a speaker than as a sort of a resonating device. there we go. I hope that answers that one. I do apologise. I really feel like I made hard work of that one, but anyway, it's a complicated and interesting subject. So, Thomas Krebs, how do you deal with humidity in your workshop? I struggle to keep it above 30 to 35 during winter months. I run a humidifier. I have radiator heating. I worry about my wood stash. Yeah, I think with mine, if anything, it's I worry about the dampness during the winter. And I run the heater and just try and keep an eye on it. I mean, the workshop is not sufficiently damp that my tools rust. I mean, I think if you're trying to work in a place where your tools go rusty, then you have probably got a problem there. So yeah, I tackle it by running an extractor in the workshop, some ventilation, and heating it occasionally, or when I'm in there. So yeah, I'm not sure where you are, Thomas, but here in the southwest of England, we have in global terms fairly mild winters. It goes below freezing sometimes, but it's normally in the low kind of plus figures during the winter, but it is damp during the winter. So there we go. WM Crash. An opinion on air-dried wood versus kiln-dried. And for air-dried, what would you say is the minimum drying time for violin stock? Okay, I think most people would agree that working on air-dried timber is nicer than working on kiln-dried timber. It just seems to have a slightly more pleasant feel. But having said that, I think the end result is probably pretty much exactly the same. Minimum time for drying violin stock. I think, as far as I remember, I think we know that. I can't find the reference for this anymore. I wish I could, but I'm sure I remember reading that Stradivarius used some timber that was only been drying for about 3 years on more than one occasion. So didn't do his instruments any harm, but a number of years clearly. And WM Crashes have gone on to answer a question I had actually, I couldn't answer last time. Someone had asked about a violin reamer, a peg reamer, saying, what was the difference between a straight cut one and a spiral cut one? And WM Crash has mentioned, as for the reamer, if they're anything like a machine tap, the spiral one will tend to pull itself in. That makes great sense. Yeah, that does make sense. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, okay, thanks for that. That's good. Yeah, someone's asking if I could play you a folk tune. Maybe. Want to make my own spool clamps. I've looked through your videos and can't find one with you using them. You know what? I do use spool clamps, and I will, after I finish recording this, I'll nip out to the workshop and measure one, and I'll put the dimensions in the description here. So have a look at the description. Yeah, I also use I've sort of got I use spool clamps a lot of the time, but I made up a sort of a jig which is much like the sort of thing that you hold the violin in. So it's effectively a sort of a flat outer thing which the edges of the violin sit on, so it doesn't touch the belly, and a similar one to go on the other side. And I use that sometimes with spool clamps, but basically so that I don't impart a twist or any sort of distortion in the body when I'm putting it together. I had to do that a couple of times when I tried taking the mold out before gluing the back on. So once you've got this really flexible kind of rib garland flapping about, and if you're not careful, you can at that stage get some distortion into the form. So that's why I've done it that way. DIY dark matter. I'm afraid I've lost all of your question really. All I've got is, okay, so I never see violins on it or any stringed instruments in the white. I suspect you're probably asking why we choose the sort of colours that we do. Yeah, good question. A lot of it's tradition really. They could certainly be sort of done in completely clear pale varnishes if you wanted to. I am going to do a video on varnishing and finishing, so I'm going to try and do that in the next day or two. So all will be revealed when I do that one. It's going to be quite a comprehensive one. No secrets. Could ribs be made by steaming and bending to a form instead of using a special bending iron? Yes, they could. They certainly could. And I mean that basically is how people tend to make guitar ribs really. I mean, not steaming so much, but using a heated silicone blanket kind of thing, which they then cramp the ribs slowly down onto a form, so they don't go through the process of, you know, bending it by hand. I'm trying to think of any reason why that would be a good or a bad idea. I think basically it would be a very fast way of doing it. I can't see any issue with that at all. It's just a question of which you choose to do, really, I think. Yeah, I think a lot of people would be horrified at the prospect of that, and that doesn't mean it's not a good idea. But there we go. Have you ever built a violin on the back? Why were older violins built in such a way? Yeah, right, okay. Anyone who's familiar with, or watch videos on Spanish guitar making, knows that sometimes it's like they make all the bits separately, and then they put the back down on a form and then glue the neck to it. So you've got the back with the neck glued on it, and then they bring in the ribs. Yes, it's quite a nice way of building, and it certainly seems that you see, I know that the in Cremona, for example, we know that they used to make the rib garland and then nail the neck onto the rib garland. So you had the rib garland with a neck, and then that used to be stuck to the back and then the front. There's another type of violin neck joint which is kind of gone out of favour now, really. I suspect because it makes life difficult for repairers. But that's one where the top block is integral with the neck, much like those Spanish guitars. And yeah, I mean those are built with the neck, with the ribs going into that. I don't know if they are built on the back first or if the block goes into the ribs first. I don't know, in all honesty. So I'm not entirely able to answer your question, but it's an interesting one, isn't it? I must admit I have looked at those integral sort of top block kind of violin sort of necks and thought, why not do it like that? It does look quite interesting, isn't it? Another question here. What's the best way to start selling your violins and where? Is it better to have a website from the beginning or just get an eBay shop or such like? Oh, the eternal question. That's a really difficult one, isn't it? For me, I kind of started selling violins because I perform a lot on the violin, and the sort of music I play, folk music, kind of attracts quite a lot of people to come watch it who actually play as well. And we always have a chat, I mean the audience and the players in folk gigs always kind of get together and have a chat afterwards. And the the question of violins always comes up. What are you playing? And so inevitably, well, it's one I made, and a very small percentage end up wanting to buy one. So that's been an important route for me. But as time has moved on and as more people have become aware that I make violins, then I've sold some directly off the website. I have very occasionally sold them on eBay, as you mentioned, especially to start off with. But mainly it's been word of mouth, largely from gigs, I think. I also do a sort of an annual sort of stand at one of the folk festivals, which is always quite good for me. That, and just, I mean, also because I have a bit of a footprint on social media, I get some, not a massive number, but some orders through that as well. So a combination of all those things kind of adds up to sufficient to keep me going, really. I have tended not to do repair work so much. I've just concentrated on making, but actually I quite enjoy a bit of repair work. So I tend to, with repair work, I don't advertise it. If people come to me, I tend to do it, but as I say, I don't push that side of it. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. It's probably just getting people to try it. So when you have something really nice to sell, I mean, for example, you might know a violin teacher. Maybe one of the best things to do is show it to a couple of violin teachers and see if they know anyone who wants to buy a violin and such. It's a difficult question, and lots of people have all sorts of different approaches. Yeah, I wish I knew the absolute answer to that, but I'm doing my best. I'm trying. Okay, so that, I think, is pretty much all of the questions that kind of survived my stupidity on deleting the Q&A last time. I'm also just going to open up the violin making discussion group thing, because there were a couple of really interesting points raised. Chap called Matt. Yeah, I mean, I'll paraphrase what he said, but basically, he's able to finish the neck, make a fingerboard cut joint, glue the neck all over the weekend. Now for the challenging part, trying to figure out how to seal, ground and varnish. This is by far the most challenging aspect of violin building for me, since absolutely nobody who knows how to do it really well is willing to lend any of their secrets. So it's trial and error, and mostly frustrating. And in the end, you can make what was decent woodworking look cheap. Matt, that's so true. And this coming week, I will do that video that everyone's asked for. Yeah, so watch this space and see what happens. Okay. And one last thing I was going to mention. Yeah, this is another one. And it's a question people ask quite a few times. How good do molds need to be? And there's I mean, I kind of in the end boiled it down to one answer, really, and that is you need them to be as good as you want the violin to be, because they inform the shape of the violin. So the things that need to be good on a mold is the curves need to flow. There shouldn't be any bumps, hollows, and also the curved sides they've got to be upright so that you don't have a distorted kind of instrument. And I've managed to get both of those in the past. So yeah, I can say from experience, it's important to treat them carefully. Now, the actual finish doesn't have to be perfect. That's my wife in the hallway there, chatting to the dog. And for example, sometimes I actually, and here comes the dog. Hello, Kathy. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Yeah. Thought you might want to say hello. There we are. Anyway, yeah, I actually trimmed the, so that's really put me out my stride. Okay, so yeah, so mold making, I mean, I actually sometimes now just literally cut them straight on the bandsaw and just leave it from the bandsaw. The bandsaw cuts, you know, if you set it properly, cuts beautifully square. And the actual surface texture isn't important as long as you get those flows right. So I tend to, if I'm going to do it straight off the bandsaw, which is what I'd like to try to do, I just work very slowly and make a decision when I finished about whether it's good enough or not. And as I say, it's got to be good enough to give the good shape, the right shape to your violin. I'm going to leave it there. I think that's a slightly disjointed Q&A this time. I hope you found something in it that was useful. Yeah, so there, as I say, the big one is that I will be doing this thing on varnishing. Okay, so look after yourselves. Cheers, folks. Bye.